Hello board gamers, today I'm going to be talking about Terrene Odyssey. Terrene Odyssey is a deck construction game that has two parties of characters fighting each other in a head-to-head battle in the style of JRPGs. Terrene Odyssey plays 1v1 or 2 versus 2, is published by CGC Games and is designed by Chris Solis, I believe it's pronounced. Inside Terrene Odyssey you'll find 108 unique cards. Obviously this isn't all the cards, just some of them. You will get a rules booklet, 6 player aid sheets. The reason it comes with 6, even though it only plays with 4, is there's 6 pre-made decks in this game. And on the back of each one of the player aid sheets is starting party tips for each of the pre-made decks. So it just helps new players jump into the game quicker. Then you'll also get a pile of tokens. I actually have 2 copies of the game, so this is double the normal of tokens, but 1 set of tokens should be more than enough. And that's what you'll find inside a copy of Terrene Odyssey. So in the game, you'll construct your own deck, or you could use one of the pre-made ones. So let's just go over deck construction. In the game, when you build a deck, it has to be 30 cards, no more, no less. You can only ever have 3 copies of a single card, and only one of your cards in the whole deck can have the tag of hero. Also, when building your deck, you have to at least have 4 one-supply characters. You can tell right there it says SP1. 4 one-supply characters, 4 items or commands, and at least 4 items or command, and then at least 1 terrain card. So all those other things, all the rules to deck building. Alright, let's get into the rules of the game. I'm going to drop the camera down so you can get a better view of the setup. So a core mechanic of this game is the starting party. And at the very beginning of the game, after you determine who's going first and who's going second, it will look like this. You'll begin the game with 4 one-supply characters. These are the characters up here in front. And then an item or a command assigned to each one character. And then you'll have a terrain card. After you have this, both players have this set up, you'll both flip over your terrain cards. And the game is ready to begin. There are 4 phases in the game. There's the command phase, the draw phase, action phase, and end phase. In the command phase, you'll just do start of turn abilities. You'll also lose any actions you had saved from the previous turn, and then gain actions equal to your terrain card. Your terrain determines how many actions you get. Hope you can see that. Okay, this one says 4 actions, so that's how much you get at the start of your turn. You could track actions with these handy tokens. After you do that, you'll move on to the draw phase, which is just draw 1 card. In Terrene Odyssey, you don't start with a hand of cards, so at the start of the game you only have 1 card. Then after that, you move into the action phase, which is where you'll be spending and attacking with your you'll be spending action tokens, usually in the action phase, and you'll also get to attack with your characters in the action phase. Some of the things you could do in the action phase: you could recruit characters. You could spend 1 action recruiting them to flip them face up on the table. So let's say I did that at the start of the game. So I have to spend 3 actions to flip up 3 characters. And then some characters give you extra actions you could do, like this character says you could spend 1 action to give a character +5 defense. And there's a ton of different abilities that characters can do, and a lot of them will require you to spend actions. Even terrain cards give you extra ways to spend actions if you have the elemental type. For example, this one says 1 action, control an earth character. Once per turn, target character gains +5 defense until the end of the turn. So there'll be a lot of actions available to you. You could also spend an action to attack with one of your characters. But the first player can attack on their first turn. In this game, you can only ever have 4 supply worth of characters on the table. So he's a 1 supply character. So you could have 4 of those if you'd like. I think the sleeve is messing it up. But he's a 1 supply character, so you could have 4 of those. Characters either cost, you could sometimes get characters for 0, 1 supply, 2 supply, or 3 supply. Characters that are always face down though characters that are face down always count as 1 supply. So after you've done what you want to do, you could pass the turn to the opponent. You could save actions for the opponent's turn to be able to respond with things that could mess them up, such as assassins. When an opponent attacks, you could spend an action, flip up an assassin to deal damage and usually an effect to that opponent. So sometimes a lot of times it's nice to save actions on the opponent's turn to be able to get them with nasty surprises like that. So then after the action phase, you'll go to the end phase, which is you just do any end of turn effects, and that's pretty much it for that phase. Additional rules of the game, how you actually win, I guess we'll go over that, is by either eliminating all characters a person has on the board, or each player or team has 50 life, and if you reduce an opponent's life to 0, you win the game that way. Most common ways to achieve this is by attacking with your characters, so we'll go over attacks. When a character attacks, you'll of course spend the one action, so let's say Jin the Ambitious was attacking. He's got an attack of 20. The opponent could either choose to just let this go through and he'll take 20 directly to his life, or he can block with one of his characters. Say he was blocking with Peter. First you would subtract his defense from the attack, so 10 from 20, so we've got 10 left, and then the remaining attack will do damage to his health. Whenever a character blocks, they're going to suffer what's called defense decay, which is -5 to their defense until the end of the turn. So you could eventually wear down big guys with lots of defense that way. If a character ever takes damage equal to his health, he's going to be defeated. Any card he had assigned to him is going to be discarded. And then the character that did the defeating is going to get XP equal to the level of the character. I'll show you that real quick. The LV, level 2, will get XP equal to the level of the character. And the bonuses you get for getting XP will be shown on your terrain card. There's many different terrain cards in the game, and each one of them gives you different kinds of bonuses. For example, the training ground cards, the training grounds card, the one I just showed you, at first XP gain they'll get +5 defense. So more of a defensive card, obviously. And so that's what happened. That's how attacking works. Okay, there's a lot of abilities in Terrene Odyssey, so I mean I can't really go over all of them. Just know there's a lot of different characters, and each character kind of fills a specific purpose and does something a little differently than the other characters. So a lot of different abilities going on. Within those abilities, though, there's different colors. You can see here there's these two abilities here at the top are green, and then the one on the bottom is blue. Blue means you could do it on anyone's turn, and in response to stuff. Green means only on your turn. There's also purple, which means you could do it on anyone's turn and it can't be responded to. There's more rules and more things going on that may appear, but that's just a kind of a basic overview. Also, in the rules for 2v2 are slightly different than 1v1. In a 2v2 game, you're going to share a health pool of 50 for your whole team, and instead of having 4 supply available to you, you'll have 3. But it kind of counts as one group. So if you don't have any characters on the board, but your teammate does, then you're still in the game. That you don't get eliminated if only one person has characters out. All right, so that's pretty much the rules of the game, or just a brief overview. So we'll go over my thoughts. I have some criticism, nothing major, but I wanted people to know about them. The rulebook isn't as clear as I like rulebooks to be. I had some questions after reading it, so something to take note of. Some of the inconsistency on the terrain card. The terrain cards are a little inconsistent. For example, I don't know if I pick it up. This 4 XP gain says +5 defense, period, gain retaliate, period. But then there's some terrain cards that say gain X and gain Y. So it seems to do the same thing, but the wording is different. I'm not sure if it means anything or if it's just a mistake that was made somewhere. Some of the terrain cards give characters abilities, but there's no way to attract. There's no way to attract those abilities. For the most part, your tokens will be able to track everything. But some terrain cards, the higher XP gains, they'll give you an ability. And there's no way to be able, besides remembering, there's no way in the box to tell that they have that ability. I think it would have been nice if they included maybe little cards that had just that ability on it, so when they gain that ability, you could attach it to that character. Otherwise, it seems like you need to maybe write it down, or just in friendly game, just try and remember it. Still not a huge thing, but something to take note of. It might bother some people. With how free-flowing the game is, once you get to the action phase, I mean, there's no real structure in the order you do things. So sometimes it could get a little confusing on what's happening, and you'll have to backtrack and remember what you did to make sure you've spent all the required number of actions. Again, something doesn't really bother me, but some people won't like the messiness of the action phase. So take note of that. Because Terrene Odyssey is a game that has a ton of different abilities, and you could respond to those abilities with your opponent could respond to them with his own abilities. It could lead to lots of questions on how those things interact. Sometimes it's not super obvious on how it's supposed to happen. So there'll be questions. Luckily, the people at CGC Games are very helpful in answering questions. I've emailed them several times asking questions and things that came up, and they responded very quickly, and I was able to get those answers and play with no problem. They've informed me that they're also working on an FAQ, which is nice to hear, because again, in a game like this, it's bound to come up. There's no way a rulebook would have been able to cover all the interactions that could come up with all the different abilities. So again, nothing major for me, but something to know. So for the most part, the criticisms weren't deal breakers for me. I still very much enjoyed this game. There's a ton of stuff to like about it, so we'll go over my positives. There's a lot of game in this box, a ton of game. 108 unique cards. Every card does something that no other card does, or they fill a job better than someone else does. Just a ton of game. There's a lot of different ways to build decks. I had a lot of fun coming up with new decks and strategies and combos that could be had within those decks. The theme is very strong in the game. Even both kind of the fluff and within the game. There's 6 different elemental types and 12 different classes. Within each elemental type and class, they each have their own feel, and each character is going to have a class and an element, and they fit that feel of it very well. For example, I showed you him earlier, Peter the Indurate. He's a guardian character, which they're the defensive guys. They tank for you. They kind of have, this is their standard stats, 25 health, 10 attack, and 10 defense. But he's Earth, so he has an ability that for an action he could grant people defense, or himself defense. That's very earthy to get that extra defense. The water character, the water guardian, has those same stats, but his ability for one action lets you draw a card, which is kind of water's focus is on drawing cards. So within the same class, the different elemental types within that class, they do their job differently, and they, depending on your deck, one could be better than the other. I don't know, it's just the theme of it. I love the theme of it. Even the terrain cards, how there's different terrain cards, and each one of them kind of is an element or a mix of 2 elements, and they feel very much like they're that element. For example, Training Grounds is the earth element, and all it gives you is extra defense, and then Retaliate, which lets you deal damage back to attackers equal to your defense, which, I don't know, it fits earth very well. And then the water one lets you draw cards. The fire one is much more aggressive, gaining attack when you level up, and then letting you deal damage to characters for actions, or for discarding cards from your discard pile. Everything fits very nicely, and it feels right. The light and dark element, they tend to be kind of more of a jack of all trades deal, but they have their differences that separate them. The heroes, since you can only include 1 hero in your deck, they have a tremendous impact on how the deck is built. Each one has their strength or their weakness, and they have cards that are much better for them than others maybe. And just including that hero kind of gives shape to your deck, but within each hero there's still many different options you can explore. So they're cool in that they matter, but they're not so strong where you can only build this one deck with them. The starting party allows you to have a solid plan, so you can't really get messed over by bad draws as much. So yeah, I like that you get a solid plan going with your starting party, but then you still have to adapt to what your draws are. You still have to adapt to what the opponent is doing. It's just a really cool mechanic, and it helps balance the luck of the draw versus having some way to work around that, but then still having it so you're not playing the same game every time. I don't think many card games I've played have managed to pull that off as well as Terrene Odyssey has. The game has a bit of bluffing, which is something I really enjoy. For example, I told you about the assassin class earlier. If an opponent has an action remaining and they have a face down character card, you have to be wondering, is that just an assassin? I mean, is that an assassin, or is that a bluff? They're just trying to make me so I don't want to attack. Or maybe they just have some sort of item, a life potion or a defense potion to help them weather my attacks. So there's a lot of bluff, or there's a bit of bluffing, and then there's trying to deduce what the opponent is up to. The more powerful cards in the game have restrictions to them. For example, there's this card called Disorientate, which drives me crazy. It makes everyone discard their whole hand, and then they draw 2 cards. But you can only use that if you control a thief. So if the opponent has a thief out, you have to be concerned about the possibility that they'll have that card available to them. But if they don't have a thief, then you're carefree about that card. I mean, there's other stuff you'd have to worry about, but you don't have to worry about Disorientate. Everything has a counter in this game, which I find very satisfying. For example, I told you that, but talked about that thief. There's actually an item in the game called Flayer, which will flip up opponents' characters and stun them, which makes it so they can't attack or defend. It will stun them till the end of the turn. So if you're worried about thieves countering what your deck wants to do, you could bring in a few Flayers and not have to worry about it. They have other counters. There's other ways to work around them too, but that's one of the bigger ways. And warriors are countered by assassins pretty well because they only have 20 hit points and no defense, so the assassin will just come out and kill them. And the beast class is a really good counter for golems and high defense characters. So everyone kind of has like a hard counter and then a soft counter, which makes it really interesting. You kind of have to prepare for that, whatever your deck wants to go into. You want to make sure that you have some sort of answer to that deck's counter. It also makes it so you can't go all in on one strategy. Your deck kind of has to be more adaptable, at least 2 different ways to play. It just makes it more interesting. I like how it makes you have to play to what the opponent is up to. You can't just mind your own business, play your deck strategy, and then not have to worry about at all what they're doing. It makes the game very much replayable. It makes it so I don't have to worry about constant new cards coming out and to keep the game fresh. There's not going to be a constant stream of cards for this game, but it will still remain fun, in my opinion, for a long time. I plan on playing this game for years. People I've shown it to have liked it a lot. People that are into card games. I've played with some that played a lot of Magic the Gathering, and he loved it. He was a big fan. He texted me later that day after playing it, said he was still thinking about it. I feel the same way when playing the game. I think about combos that are possible when I'm not playing it, and I can't wait to play it again. If any of that sounded remotely interesting to you, if you're into CCGs but you can never find anyone that wants to play with you because they don't want to spend the money on their own deck and they don't want to spend all the money to get a competitive deck, check this game out. If you like JRPGs, check this out. If you're into card games or any of that stuff, I strongly urge you to check this game out. Alright, thanks for watching. Whoops.